Welcome to Morning Coffee with Warren from Braddon Business Centre. In this series of podcasts, we discuss a range of business issues and experiences with successful business operators from throughout northwest Tasmania. Well, good morning. I'm Warren Moore from Braddon Business Centre, and we're here at the Highclere Roadhouse having a conversation with the owner and operator, Lisa Turner.
Hi Warren, how are you today?
Well, thank you. Lisa, can you tell me a little bit about your business, how long you've been here, how many people you employ, and just a few things about your business?
Yeah, certainly. My husband and I started the business up from scratch 10 and a half years ago. We started the business with 4 employees and now we have 13. We set up as a company and we bought a former petrol station. So we bought a vacant site and had to take it out of the gutter and bring it into the 21st century, and we've done that slowly over the last 10 and a half years.
And from the work that we've undertaken prior, Highclere Roadhouse is a thriving business. It opens from very early in the morning till very late at night and quite often is the only business opening, so it's quite an important business in our region. So you've done well to take it as far as you have.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes I don't take enough time to actually reflect on what we've achieved because I still feel like I'm deep in the trenches keeping it open all the time. We're open to the public 106 hours a week, 3 a.m. to 7 p.m, Monday to Friday, and 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. on the weekend. So it's still a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours.
Lisa, one of the projects that we've been working with you on in recent times is the replacement of your fuel tanks. It's an issue that a lot of older service stations have to deal with at some stage or other. It's certainly a commercial risk and an environmental risk. When it came to replacing your fuel tanks or repairing your fuel tanks, what sort of decisions did you have to take into consideration?
The very first decision was factored in about selling the property down the track to make it much easier to sell, much easier for somebody else to get finance to come into the business one day. We also knew we couldn't afford an environmental disaster of any kind. Our ageing tanks went back into the 1980s. When 2017, we made the decision to look into upgrading the infrastructure, and that was the very last piece of the puzzle that this property needed.
And what sort of options did you consider in talking about upgrading of infrastructure? And a lot of small businesses need to do that at some stage or other, and it's a big decision to make because of the upheaval involved, apart from the dollars, and then sourcing the dollars. What sort of things did you take into consideration there?
The initial consideration was longevity for the site, future-proofing the site to be as viable as possible. The minimum environmental risk was really important to us. And at that stage, there were a lot of above-ground fuel tanks popping up all over Tasmania. And we really wanted to go down that path. It makes it really easy and less stressful if your fuel's above ground and you can monitor what's going on, less risk to the environment. The infrastructure that we've end up installing is the most environmentally sound infrastructure we could have got, but getting to that point took 3 years and a lot of hard work.
One of the issues that I've found over the years is that operators of small business are so busy working in the business that it's really hard to find time to gather the information, find out who knows what, who's got the expertise, compliance, all of those sorts of things. So I know we're talking about fuel tanks in this case, but in terms of small business, the work involved with gathering all the information and who's got the most reliable source and who can be trusted with that. How did you go about that?
Wow, that was incredibly hard and surprisingly hard for us when we look back at the journey from the very first conversation we had about replacing the infrastructure to the end of the project. The difficulty in getting technical advice took us really, really by surprise when we were speaking with people who had been in the industry, fuel industry, for a really long time. So alongside running a 100-hour-a-week business where I was working in and on it, I was knocking on doors attempting to get finance, and our very first port of call was our business banker with the bank we'd been trading with for the 6 years we'd already been in business. She took 4 months and knocked on every door that she knew inside and outside of that bank to eventually decline our request for finance. And that took us by surprise. While we were seeking finance, we were asking questions of people who were installing above ground infrastructure on their own sites in Tasmania. That was our fuel supplier, an organisation that had been our fuel supplier for 6 years, and we were really surprised at the lack of advice and support that they were offering. And it still took 2 years of asking questions of anybody that we thought could help us. Part of the challenge was getting people who had this expertise to come to site to look at our site. We would wait months for people who would install this type of equipment to come and talk to us to see what we could fit on our site, offer us as many options, and also get the cost of the different options that we could have put in place here.
One of the really interesting facets of the path you've gone down just from the involvement of Braddon Business Centre was that the big end of town businesses can be useful under some circumstances, but in the end, when I look at where you've got the business advice from, your environmental advice through ES&D, and even now your fuel supplier, you've really ended up dealing with the small end of town through smaller businesses and locals to come up with a lot of the technical advice, the solutions, the financial solutions, the supply solutions, the environmental compliance. Is that how you found it?
Oh, absolutely. And we really didn't make good progress until we actually changed fuel supplier as well. It was nearly 2 years into the process of trying to get the advice on what all our options were to upgrade our infrastructure. And there were various options we could have taken. We knew what we wanted to achieve, but we kept getting a lot of, no, you can't do that. No, your site's not big enough. No, they just won't fit. You can't do here on your site what you want to do. And then trying to get the various options, and we did find it really, really frustrating. And partway through the journey, we just took a step back and had a breather to try and regroup because we were starting to get a little frustrated, and we didn't know there for a while where to turn. And it wasn't until after 2 years of rejection from the banking sector for finance that my husband Darren knocked on the door of a politician and said, "This is what we're trying to achieve. This is our journey so far. We don't know where to turn. We know fuel is needed in this rural area. We want to future-proof the place. But at this point in time, we're looking at removing the fuel completely because we cannot get any assistance in putting new infrastructure and getting finance for it. Can you help us? Can you tell us where to turn?"
And where did you go to from there?
He was able to recommend Braddon Business Centre, which we are so grateful for. And that process just took a weight off our shoulders. Your wealth of knowledge, Warren, was invaluable to us and helped us achieve what we'd been trying to do.
Thanks for that, Lisa. It's the sort of work that we do, but I will say at this point that service stations do have their own risks as far as financing goes. They're seen as a higher risk by the banking sector, as you have pointed out, and we're able to go to state government to see how they may be able to help, because we were able to establish that Highclere Roadhouse was in fact a strategic asset in that it was open a lot of times when no one else was open. It was a source of fuel for people going up and down the highway. And we also came to realise that it's where the ambulances used to change over from the West Coast to Burnie, and we were able to put up a case that it was quite an important business in the region, and the government supported in that case, which was a really good thing to be able to do. So looking back, if you were doing it again, what would you do differently?
Because I didn't know what we had ahead of us. That's a really hard one, because we felt that we didn't give up. At no point did we completely give up. We knew what we wanted to achieve, but I don't really know how to honestly answer that question about what I would do differently, with obviously hindsight and so much more knowledge now. But we found it really hard to find the people who were willing to help us. There were people there that had the knowledge of what we wanted to do, but for some reason or other wouldn't share that with us or make the time to come and help us.
One of the things that made it a lot easier for Braddon Business Centre to work with you to develop a case, and also for funders to approve funding, was that the business in itself was in a very sound situation from a cash flow point of view, from a revenue generation point of view, from a profitability point of view. All of those things added up, very low debt. So the business was in a very strong situation. I find often enough that people are seeking finance, but when you look at how sound their business is, it's not in a sound position, and really no one was going to lend to them. Your situation was that you had a very sound business, and in any other sector, the bank would have financed it, but seeing it was fuel, and the environmental aspects of underground fuel tanks and so on, that was the issue. So I think hats off to yourself and Darren for working really hard in the business to develop a very sound business as far as that's concerned, and persevering with it. And I think one of the other things that I'd like to add is that it's one of the features of small business that I find is that it's very much dependent upon the owner, and you have shown a case where perseverance really pays off and keeping on going and keeping on going and keeping on going, but it's keeping on going with advice as opposed to just doing whatever you want to do and when you actually want to do it.
You couldn't be more spot on there, Warren. It did take us by surprise, the rejection from the banking sector, knowing we had a solid trading history. That really took us by surprise, but the challenges of getting the best environmental advice and advice on infrastructure, it took us by surprise how hard it was to get that advice alongside the financial support. A lot of that ended up coming from environmental services and design, not directly from the fuel industry itself.
So really, in wrapping things up, from what I can see, and other businesses who are looking to go down this capital expenditure path, it's really good to separate out what you want to buy from how you're going to pay for it. I mean, you've got to bring those two things together in the end, but it's quite often to get those things confused along the way. And perseverance is another one, dealing locally. Not because locally is nice, but locally quite often means that you've got access to locally relevant information, availability of expertise, and that expertise has a passion for the region. So it's worth sticking with local business, and that's really where you've ended up along the way. So
absolutely, we couldn't be happier with the support that we've received. Environmental Services and Design, 20 minutes, their offices from where we are, as is Braddon Business Centre. We've received great support locally, along with the politicians whose doors we knocked on to ask for help when we didn't know where else to turn. Combination of people there, all unrelated to the fuel industry directly, that have been able to help us. I'd suggest to anybody, just knock on as many doors as you can, talk to as many other business owners as you can. That's something I would have liked to have done more of in the last 10 years, is had more contact with other small business owners for support and advice, but because our business is so demanding in the length of hours that we work, that was something that I was just too time poor to pursue. But that's something I would like to put myself available for, is to help anyone else out down the track if they wanted to come and talk to Darren and or I about our journey so far.
And just looking to the future, one of the reasons for putting in the above ground tank, it does give you an exit strategy or a greater chance of an exit strategy from here moving on. So do you see yourself staying here for a longer period of time or a shorter period of time?
It's taken me so long to get the business where I really wanted it to get to, and it is there where I don't now, just in the last 6 months, have to work in the business and on it to keep it going, and I would love to stay here for longer. I'm trying to get the life balance that I need to make that happen. I really do want to stay here. And the infrastructure we've put in as well is also a resaleable asset. So if in 10 years' time 90% of the cars on the road were electric cars, the above ground infrastructure we have got could move into the farming sector or the mining sector or the trucking industry, or where fuel will still be needed down the track. So that was a plus as well in going in the direction we went.
It's a real problem that a lot of operators of small businesses have, and I'm probably one of them, that we spend so much time working in the business and not enough time working on it, when we probably know it should be the other way around, but it's really hard to do that. So you sound like you're well on the way to achieving that. So well done, because not a lot of us achieve that. I'd really like to wish you the best for the future. I think you've got a solid future ahead of you. You've seen some hurdles, overcome those hurdles, developed a strong business, developed a forward-looking focus, sought advice. I think the best is in front of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. I couldn't have done it without your support. It's been invaluable. I'm so grateful.
If you're thinking of starting a business, have a specific business problem, want to grow your business and stay one step ahead of your competitors, reach out to Braddon Business Centre at braddonbusiness.com.au.